So what's up? Good morning, good evening, earners. It's your boy, Mr. Beazy. It's a pleasure to be here with you guys today, man. I am excited. So before I get started, let me tell you a little bit about myself. Some of you are wondering, who is this guy shouting at me this evening? Get used to it because I'm just full of energy. So I go by the name of Mr. Beazy. I'm an inspirational, motivational speaker. I've been doing this for the last 12 years now, and I literally travel all across the United Kingdom, motivating and speaking to people, whether they're in education, in business, or in sports. And I've had the pleasure and honor of traveling to different countries such as Scotland and Switzerland to go and motivate people as well. For me, I'm a fellow earner as well, so for me it's only right that I share some of my tools and gems with my people. And I'm excited about tonight's webinar, man. Motivational speaking is something that I think when you think about motivational speaking, people can have different mindsets towards it. You get some people that they think of Tony Robbins, the Les Browns, and then you get some people that think of like E.T. Eric Thomas. That's my guy personally. That's who I like to follow. So you're gonna see that maybe there's some similarities between myself and E.T. because I just feel like E.T.'s got that energy, that fire that really resonates with me. And I hope that I can just really give you guys some tools and tips tonight that you guys would also resonate with. As I'm going throughout the presentation, feel free to put some questions in the Q&A box or some questions in the chat, and at the end of it I'll make sure that we have time to address your questions, because I don't just want to be here speaking at you and not give you guys the opportunity as well to kind of get some questions answered. All right, so I'm going to get straight into it. So can I share my presentation? Is that cool?
Absolutely, we're ready.
All right, let's go. So I'm gonna share my screen with you guys, as they say. I've got a little fancy presentation for you guys,
Okay.
But I say fancy, it's PowerPoint, guys, don't get excited, don't expect like animations and moving images, but I did it myself, so I'm proud,
All right.
All right. We're gonna get it popping, as you guys say, right? So here we go. All right, so yes, public speaking. If you guys can see my presentation, just give me a number 1 in the chat so I know we're good. Yeah, we're good. Lovely. Wonderful. Brilliant. So I'm going to get straight into it right now. So here's just some of the content of what I'm going to be covering tonight, so things like how to structure a talk, a speech, rules of engagement, how to connect with your audience, the importance of energy, eye contact, personality, body language, and diction. These are just some of the elements that I feel are really important when it comes to, delivering a motivational speech or any sort of speech or presentation, right? So the first thing is how to structure your talk. Now, a typical talk, guys, is broken down into what we call 3 segments. So you have your opening, you have what we call your core, which is like the middle part of your talk, and you have like your closing, right? And I feel like the key thing whenever you are going to deliver a talk is you must set the tone from the opening. So for example, whenever I'm going to deliver a talk, one thing I do as my sort of audience and crowd is coming in, I've got music playing, right? But watch this. One thing that's key is knowing your audience before you get there, right? So, right, if I'm going to be like speaking to a bunch of country folk, I am about to play no Meek Mill as they're coming in, right? I might play some Taylor Swift for them, though. Do you see what I'm saying? Because what happens is when you can play music that your audience can relate to, automatically it puts them in a good mood. Automatically it helps them to put their guard down, but automatically you straight away build some form of rapport with them. And what I find is by the time like the music stopped and the introduction comes, I find that my audience are a lot more relaxed and they're a lot more willing to engage with me when I say whether good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. But what you find is when there's no music, there's no energy created, then you find that people struggle with energy. So imagine you walk into an auditorium, it's absolute silence, there's no music playing, everyone's just kind of maybe talking amongst themselves, and then out of nowhere, someone comes on stage and be like, hey, good evening. You're gonna be like, who's this, right? So it's really important that you set the tone. Another thing that I realized in your opening, so I said, it can be a statement or you can be a question. Now, one thing I love to do with my audience when I open, I love to ask them questions. Why? Interaction is so important. Now, whenever you go to like a seminar, a talk, or anything like that, naturally people know what they're going there for, right? But one thing that I found is so effective is interacting with your audience, and don't be afraid to do it right from the opening. Ask them a question. And that's one thing that I love to do. I love to ask them a question. So, how many people here can relate to this? Or how many people here have done this? How many? And people, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. I've done that. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. That's me. You know, even if I'm like, for example, you know, talking in education and I go to a school, I'm like, hey, man, how many of you can't stand school at the moment? How many of you can't stand the way? And it's like, yeah, I can relate to that. So, you know, you might be even in a corporate setting, you know, how many of you can't stand the state of the economy at the moment? People are like, yes, I mean, I feel you right now. But it's so important to kind of set the foundation. I love questions. You can start with a statement or a quote or something like that, but I just feel like it's so strong when you ask a question and you kind of get your audience involved straight away. Now, in the kind of middle bit, the core bit of your talk, of your speech, this is where you should address, you know, the key information, tell your stories, and again, ask questions. One thing you'll see whenever I deliver a speech, a talk, is I ask questions throughout my presentation, right? I never want to feel like I'm losing my audience. So I always want to keep them involved, because naturally, as human beings, we live in a generation where it's hard to keep focused nowadays. You know, when you've got the likes of like TikTok and Instagram and Snapchat, and you know, when you're viewing posts, and if that post doesn't maybe capture your attention within 3 to 5 seconds, we're used to scrolling onto the next post, or you know, flicking to the next video. And we live in a generation where you must capture people's interest very fast, right? So whenever I'm delivering a speech, even when I'm in the middle section of the speech, I like to ask questions just to make sure that my audience is still engaged. So it could be little things like, if you can relate to what I just said, raise your hands. Why? That is getting my audience involved. That's making sure they're still awake. That's making sure that they're still with me, right? Another thing that's really important is, you know, feel free to tell stories, but make sure that your stories are relevant, right? Now, when it comes to motivating an audience, one thing I try not to do, and one thing I really don't find inspiring, is when people just go on about what they've achieved, right? If it's relevant, you know, like for example, hey, I spoke for Microsoft, I spoke for Apple, I spoke for AT&T, and yeah, and now my life, that's great. That's great. But I'm struggling with discipline. And me finding out that you spoke for AT&T ain't helping me with my discipline. It ain't helping me with my time management. But then watch this. If I now tell you a story of how I struggled with discipline and how I overcame that discipline, hey man, for example, I was this weight, and you know, I went through this journey where I lost 5 stone. You know, I used to wake up at 4 a.m. in the morning to go to the gym. I changed my eating habit, and I kind of tell them a story about me, but it's relevant to the topic of discipline as well at the same time, because anyone can say a story about a celebrity, right? But what I find is so much more inspiring when you can find a relatable story about yourself that can connect to your audience, right? You know, there's no point me coming here and talking about, hey, Kevin Hart this and Denzel Washington this and this person this, because you might not ever get the chance to meet those people. You might not ever be in the same arena as those people. But when you're addressing that audience, you're there right there and then in front of them. They have an opportunity to ask you questions. They may have an opportunity to take a selfie with you afterwards, you know, shake your hand. And it's so much more inspiring when you can get some inspiration from the person who's actually in front of you. Because naturally, as human beings, you know, we don't want to be sold a dream. We don't want to be sold a story. We want someone to keep it real with us. Or I know you Americans say, keep it a buck with you, right? Is that what you guys say? Keep it a buck, right? So you just want someone to, you know, just keep it real with you guys, right? And that's one thing I say, man, like, do not be afraid to be authentic and just keep it real with people, with your stories. I like to tell people about my experiences, things that I've gone through, as long as it relates to them. I don't like just telling people things about me for the sake of doing it. I like it to do it so that it makes sense, they can relate to it, they can gain some inspiration from it, and they can figure out how they can apply these sort of stories and tools to their own life.